Do the Mets have the best rotation in the National League?
If you go back to June 13th, the New York Mets starting pitching rotation has the best ERA of any team in the National League with a 370 mark. David Peterson has a 2.50 ERA. That ranks 7th in the National League. Sean Manaea, a 2.70 ERA. That ranks 9th in the National League. And Jose Quintana, a 3.42 ERA. That ranks 15th in the National League. David Peterson and Sean Manaea have been a 1-2 punch that are comparable with any 1-2 in some of the best starting staffs in all of baseball. I'm talking Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. I'm talking Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez of the Braves. I'm talking Framber Valdez and Hunter Brown of the Houston Astros. The Mets starting staff has been that good. And then we haven't even talked about Luis Severino, who's had some really great starts for the Mets, of course. The complete game he threw a couple starts ago. When he goes out there, he gives the Mets a chance to win.
Thanks for meeting us at the Apple. I'm Vito Calisi. You can follow me on Twitter at Vito F. Calisi, and I'm with John Barron at JMB9191. And you should all tweet at him because at the time of this recording, it's John's birthday.
It is. I still have a few hours. What a weekend it's been. Birthdays aren't as much fun as you get older.
No.
I'm now 30. I'm at 33 years old. That is a big number. Yesterday with the kickoff of college football season, I remember my 21st birthday. It feels like just yesterday. It was week 1 of college football. Indiana had a home game. It was a fun day. And, a lot has changed in my life. I can say that for sure, being a dad now and everything like that. So different kind of birthday weekend, but still always, fun to see friends and family and, talk to people and all that good stuff. So I appreciate the birthday wishes there, Vito.
Do you have a TV on right now, John?
There's 2 things going on here. So number one,
why do you have a strobe light?
The light behind me, that one light in the corner there is flickering. And when I turned the lights on in here and I saw that, I was like, oh, this could be problematic. I thought maybe like the slider wasn't all the way up, but it is. And so I don't know what to do. I hoped you wouldn't notice, but you've got a keen eye. So you noticed less than 2 minutes into the recording. So that's pretty good. And then the other part of your question, of course, I have Braves Phillies on. It's to the left.
Yeah.
So I'm not directly looking at it. I don't think
that's fine.
I don't think it's the light.
If you would have told me the light was Braves Phillies, I wouldn't have cared because we all have Braves Phillies on right now. We're all singing dreams and nightmares. You saw the Steve Cohen tweet. He's watching the game too. We're all invested in this. Let's go Philly. I love the Rocky movies. I love everything they have to offer. There's a few games this year I'm not going to be rooting for them, but right now we're rooting for Philly. Me, John, and Hunter, we're also rooting for Philly on the way home after we recorded that episode on the way back from Lehigh Valley, the minor league affiliate of the Philadelphia Phillies, and we got to listen to them win that game. But let's do some Mets talk now because the Mets just swept the Chicago White Sox in a really interesting note, gave the White Sox their worst record in franchise history guaranteed, and the White Sox are now on that path to take away the worst season in Major League Baseball history from the New York Mets. And that's they're 9 wins away from that right now, John.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell by just watching the games and seeing the crowd dynamics on TV that there were a ton of Mets fans there in Chicago. And you obviously have the SNY truck. John DeMarsco, the great SNY director, he was really painting the picture for the viewers at home, showing the White Sox fans in attendance with the bags over their heads. It's pretty crazy. Like the old adage is everyone loses 60 games, everyone wins 60 games. It's what you do with the rest of the games that determines what kind of season you're going to have. The White Sox aren't going to win 60 games and they're not going to win 50 games. It really looks like they are going to set this record of futility. And the Mets helped them along a little bit this weekend by handing them 3 more losses. Like you mentioned, they've now set a franchise record for losses in a season. But on the other end of that, the Mets did the job. And it really felt like from a distance watching, you and I aren't in the clubhouse in the dugout, but it felt like the team was aware of what could go wrong here. And that if they didn't take advantage the way they needed to, how tough of a blow that could be to their playoff chances.
Well, Francisco Lindor said that. Francisco Lindor said to the media before this that that's a struggling team and you can't. He said Francisco Lindor, I believe, said to the rest of the team, we can't go into this asleep. We have to give them everything we got because I said this to you and Hunter in the car ride home. There's a level of what these guys in the White Sox are playing for right now that has as much pressure as a playoff push because those guys on that team, you know what they definitely don't want? They don't want their name on that list of the worst baseball team of all time. So that's something you're playing up against when you're playing the White Sox.
100%. And, the Yankees went there not too long ago. The White Sox put a big number on them in the first game of that series. And, you see it throughout baseball, throughout the course of a baseball season. Teams that are quote unquote underdogs or have much worse records than their opponents can easily, win 1 out of 3 games in a series. And it was important for the Mets to sweep this series, knowing that the road ahead gets a little bit tougher with the Red Sox and the Reds, and then a 6-game road trip looming. And that, the Mets had to let a couple of games slip away, both before the road trip and during the road trip, which turned out to be a great road trip. You mentioned at the top of the show a 7-3 road trip in the 10 games. We say this a lot here, and I don't think it's a cliche that's overly used. If we had said when the trip started, would you sign for 7-3? The answer is not, yeah, I'd sign. The answer is, curse word, yeah, I'd sign for that, because it's a great record to go on a tough trip with 4 in San Diego, 3 in Arizona, and then finishing up there in Chicago. And the Mets got the job done. So tip of the cap to all 26, actually 28 guys now. My mistake.
Yes.
Paul.
Let's mention that. Let's mention the 2
that.
call-ups.
What a segue there.
That was perfect. And John, real quick, I want to say, man, there were some Mets fans going crazy before this road trip. I had a friend text me, and you wouldn't believe this. He said he thought the Mets were going to go 1-6 on that West Coast trip. Can you believe that?
Look, I think that in a lot of ways, sports fans are sort of programmed to be waiting for the other shoe to
Imagine if
drop.
that guy saw this record right now, that guy would feel so silly. So
Well, the Mets
that's just a message to the Mets fans who get pessimistic. If you allow me to be direct, guys, they play up to good teams. Let's keep this going. But John, let's talk about Pablo Reyes and Alex Young, the 2 guys that were called up.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Young, another lefty reliever. He was with the Mets earlier in late July, I think it was. So he comes back to the major league roster. And then the big name and the big news really was, what were the Mets going to do with the position player they were going to add? And there really were a lot of options down at AAA Syracuse, guys like DJ Stewart. Luis Angel Acuna, of course, had his name talked about, a guy in the 40-man roster. Luke Ritter's a guy who's definitely made a case for a promotion to the major leagues, 26 home runs now in the International League. And then there's Pablo Reyes, who, the Mets let Luis Guillorme walk after last season. And they bring in Joey Wendell, sign him to a major league contract, and they intend for Joey Wendell to be that jack of all trades infielder. That's such an important position, to have a guy that could play second, third, and short. Luckily for the Mets, they have a guy at shortstop who doesn't ever miss a game. It doesn't work out with Joey Wendell. And the Mets, who shrewdly signed Jose Iglesias to a minor league deal during the offseason, pretty much find lightning in a bottle, and that lightning has continued ever since Jose came up. Another big weekend for Jose. He takes on that role of Joey Wendell, and he's given the Mets, all sorts of value at what the contract is that the Mets signed him to. And then the Mets acquire Pablo Reyes from the Red Sox, a very under-the-radar move earlier this season. Pablo had a cup of coffee with Boston earlier in the year, struggled a bit, but he had some big hits for the Red Sox. In 2023, he had a walk-off home run, game-tying home run late in the game. And for AAA Syracuse, 10 home runs, OPS over 800, 10 stolen bases, and as a guy who can play all over the place. So you heard Carlos Mendoza say that's what the Mets were looking for, speed and versatility. His first game with the Mets on Sunday, he pinch runs in the 9th inning, and he scores from first base on a Starling Marte double, already making an impact. So when you think about the options the Mets had, Pablo Reyes really makes a lot of sense, and it's another, I don't want to say fringe guy. It's winning by the margins is what the Mets have done so well all season long, and this is another example of the Mets targeting a guy, building depth in AAA, and that now helping the Mets at the major league level.
Yeah, and look, there were a lot of Mets fans who were hoping to see Luis Angel Acuna come up, especially after Carlos Mendoza made that comment about speed. But at the end of the day, what you want to see from your prospects is you want them to get called up at the right time. You want these guys to get called up when is going to be the most beneficial to them, not just the Mets. And right now, Luis Angel Acuna really starting to heat up at AAA. He's got to get those AAA at-bats in. You look at guys who didn't get too much time at AAA, didn't really get to develop there, and they get called up to the roster. They're not exactly ready. I'm not saying that's always the case, but this seems like the right decision. And, happy to see what Pablo Reyes can do. We saw him have a moment today where he went first to home on a fly ball from Starling Marte. So, look, so far, looks like the right decisions were made. Everybody was happy to see Alex Young get called back up, but I think it's a really important time to talk about the 5 best moments from Mets White Sox. And number 5 is going to be the Tyrone Taylor net catch from game 1, because it was just incredible. Everything from the launch into the net, Then the dismount, utterly fabulous.
As graceful as it gets. And of course, right after the catch happened, everyone on Mets Twitter made the same connection that Jeff McNeil made a very similar play in the same corner there at Guaranteed Rate. I think it's Guaranteed Rate Field back in
Yes.
August of 2019. So, Mets social media with a hilarious the Office meme. Corporate wants you to identify the difference between these two pictures. Really funny stuff there. But I mean, Tyrone Taylor, we've talked about it frequently. A lot of big hits for the Mets this year, and he's played stellar defense. Continue that in Chicago over the weekend with that highlight reel catch.
And did you see that Jeff McNeil referenced it on Instagram as well?
I did not see that. It's funny though.
Yeah, Jeff McNeil put it up on Instagram and he said something like "looking good, Tyrone." But yeah, that was a really fun moment. That leads us right into number 4, also from Game 1, JD Martinez's home run to really get the Mets going.
Yeah, JD continues to swing a good bat. In his last 12 games, he's hit 4 home runs, has 10 RBI. It seems like a little bit of the pressure has been taking off of JD's back ever since he was dropped a bit in the lineup by Carlos Mendoza. And it's underratedly and sneakily been another one of those lineup moves that Carlos Mendoza has made that's paid dividends. We obviously know about Francisco Lindor finding a home atop the Mets lineup and, having an MVP type season there since that move was made. Brandon Nimmo, how hot he got when he was moved to second in the lineup. Mark Vientos was recently moved to second in the lineup, and he's had a lot of success. So it seems like Carlos Mendoza, every time he mixes and matches and shuffles the deck, it pays off. And JD Martinez, in his recent hot streak, has been another example of that.
Number 3 moment, Sean Manaea just continues to doodle bob. Game 3 of this series, another game, another 7 innings pitched.
It's the 7th time that Sean has gone at least 7 innings in a ball game since the start of July. That's the most by any pitcher in Major League Baseball. He allowed 2 hits. He was in cruise control. I apologize, Vito and Hunter and Amanda on our team. They blame me. I don't believe in this, but I noted that Sean Manaea had not allowed a hit at a point, and I think about 17 seconds later, he allowed one of the 2 hits that he surrendered on Sunday. But go ahead, Vito, and then I'll make my point.
Did you notice that I actually responded and agreed with you? And then the second he gave up the hit, I actually just unsent my message and acted like I didn't say anything.
No, I missed the unsend. I was at brunch with my family and I saw an unsend and I totally missed it. I appreciate you being honest about that. So what happened was, the background on that is, when no hitters seem to be percolating, you want to think of the catchy phrase like no harm.
We talked about this last time he almost had a
no-hitter. Right.
We did. Right. We even brought up the 2 things that we thought it might be. It would have been Manono or it would have been Manoa.
Right.
But John, I 100% texted. I said something about like, oh, it would be pretty sick because blah, blah, blah. And then the second it gave up, I just undid my text message and I was like, man, John's a jerk, right?
Yeah, well, it happens. But what I was going to say about Sean is this is getting to the point now, Vito, where every time he takes the mound, it feels like something special could happen in one of his starts. He has been that utterly dominant. And on Sunday, it was the sinker. We've talked about the 4-seam fastball. That's really been his biggest weapon. On Sunday, he was sinker heavy and he had all sorts of success with it. I think 9 batters he retired on 3 pitches or fewer in his start, helped him keep the pitch count down. And that's how he's been able to go so deep into ball games. And Sean has been one of the best pitchers in all of Major League Baseball, going back, really 15 starts. If you go back to his June 13th start, or June 14th start, excuse me, against the San Diego Padres. So we'll talk more about the starting pitching and how great it's been. Dare we say possibly the best starting staff in the National League this season? Sean Manaea is a huge part of that. Another great ace-like outing on Sunday. And Carlos Mendoza even said he's starting to look at Sean Manaea as the anchor of this staff. And I mean, he's not wrong, because Sean Manaea is doing anchor-like stuff.
Yeah, Sean Manaea has so many intangibles as well. We've brought this up on many episodes, but a lot of guys on the team, they accredit the vibes and the positivity and just the energy in the clubhouse. Not 100% to Sean, but a big part of it is from Sean and what he brings to a clubhouse, which I've been told from guys that played with Sean on different teams that aren't even part of the Mets staff, just that Sean Manaea is that dude. The number 2 moment from Mets White Sox, Garrett Crochet looks like he's just going to be slicing up the Metropolitans. What happens? Francisco Lindor comes up, hits his 29th home run of the year, keeps that on base and hitting streak going. And Francisco Lindor just constantly every day going out there and making Shohei Ohtani sweat.
Making him sweat, leading by example, another big hit, getting the scoring going. And really, like you mentioned, making Crochet look human, because it looked like he was about to have a Jacob deGrom type start
Yeah.
by striking out the first 8, possibly 9 guys he faced. And we know Crochet has been one of the, unfortunately for them, very few bright spots of the White Sox season. He's a guy that was drafted and went right to the major leagues, had Tommy John, has come back better than ever. He was the White Sox All-Star representative this past July in Arlington. So when you looked at the pitching matchups for the series, you saw Crochet looming on Sunday, and that was the one guy that you were maybe a little bit afraid of, and he showed you why. But, of course, the White Sox have him on a pitch count. Lindor got to him. You mentioned the on-base streak, Vito. It's now a 30-game on-base streak for Francisco Lindor, and that sets the longest of his major league career. He had a 29-game on-base streak back in 2017. In 2018, Lindor hit 38 home runs, and that was the most he'd ever hit in a major league season to this point. You mentioned, 29 home runs. It's not out of the realm of possibility with a big September, and Francisco Lindor, since he's become a Met, has had strong finishes to his seasons. If you look at all 3 seasons before this year, the way he's finished, especially September 2021, after, a little bit of a struggle early in his Met career, he was dominant in that September, and the counting stats and the total stats of the full season really didn't look that bad after all because of the huge September he had. This could be another mega September for a guy who we know is embracing this MVP talk. And if he can have a big month, he could possibly set his career high for home runs. And that's a huge number, especially for a shortstop.
Did you get to see the post-game interview that he had with Gelbs?
I know that number one, he said he missed his wife and his daughter, which I totally get. And I know that he was getting MVP chants. I saw Gelbs' tweet.
Yeah.
That when he did the interview, fans were chanting MVP, and Jose Iglesias ran out of the dugout and took a bow.
Just shows you like what kind of energy this Mets team has and how important that is going in and every day out. And something JD Martinez said in a pregame press. I don't know if it was pregame or postgame, but he said that the best teams in baseball are the teams that get these rallies and score on 2 outs. It's not what you do when there's no outs or 1 out. He really talked about how these 2-out Mets have just really put some interesting scoring patterns together and just, something that's exciting to see. And we've seen that 2-out magic before with the Mets, like going back to 2022, some incredible moments like against the Phillies, against the Cardinals early in the season. But he's right. What you do with 2 outs makes a difference because you're always in that game. Now, time for your number one moment of Mets White Sox. Think this is another easy one. Pete Alonso and Jesse Winker go back to back. Jesse Winker is looking like something this Mets team has needed at the deadline for some time now.
Yeah, Winker's been great. The Mets have not used him as much against left-handed pitchers, but they've used him and they've put him in spots where they know he can have success. The Nationals deployed him in a similar way, and he's really putting similar numbers up to his time in Washington, and that's to say, getting on base at one of the top 10 clips in the National League. Right now with the Mets, he has an 834 OPS. He's only struck out 13 times in 79 plate appearances, so he's done a great job getting on base, continues to do that. Of course, the home run that he hit the last time we were home at Citi Field until on Monday against the Red Sox, the walk-off he hit, and then a big couple games in San Diego doing some damage, and then he goes back-to-back with Pete on Saturday in Chicago and really kind of had the Mets put an exclamation point early in that game. You wanted to see that, especially against a struggling team. Sunday's game was a close game late. Carlos Mendoza had to go to his bullpen. Reed Garrett, Edwin Diaz had to get those final 6 outs. You wanted the Mets to have at least one game where didn't have to sweat as much, didn't have to throw as many high-leverage pitches. And when you go back-to-back and put up a 3-spot by a couple home runs in the first inning of a game, you can accomplish that. And those home runs, really, the home run, Vito, is what the Mets are powered by. It's the home run, and it's the starting pitching. And the Mets in their last 18 games have hit 28 total home runs. They've been on kind of a home run barrage in June and July when they were playing good baseball and they really got themselves back into the race. They were homering nonstop. You think about some of the big moments, those Friday night games, the big inning against the Braves, the big inning against the Marlins a couple homestands ago, the 3-run home run Jeff McNeil hit against Ronel Blanco Friday night against the Astros back on June 28th. The Mets have really out-homered teams or homered teams to death, and they've been doing that again recently, and that's why you go back 16 games now, the last 16 games, the Mets have won 11 of their last 16 games, and they've been slugging, and that's been a formula for success for this team.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next segment on this show. Every week on the podcast, we ask the viewers a question. This week, the question is, do the Mets have the best rotation in the National League?
Well, we've teased it a couple times talking about the White Sox series, and the Mets got three more really solid starting pitching performances on the South Side. And Vito, I was thinking about it, and I just talked about the home runs and the power and the starting pitching, and I looked and I went back to June 13th, and that's really when things started to turn around for the Mets. I believe it was Grimace night, actually, right around that time. And if you go back to June 13th, the New York Mets starting pitching rotation has the best ERA of any team in the National League with a 370 mark. So we're talking more than 2 months here. The Mets starting pitchers have been unmatched when it comes to earned run average. And the Mets have three guys in the National League in the top 15 in this category. David Peterson has a 2.50 ERA. That ranks seventh in the National League. Sean Manaea, a 2.70 ERA. That ranks ninth in the National League. And Jose Quintana, a 3.42 ERA. That ranks 15th in the National League. Even though Quintana had some rough starts, he's bounced back with two really solid starts, the one that he had in San Diego and the one that he had in Chicago. And only the Braves have three guys in the top 15 as well. You look at 1-2 punches this season, especially the second half of what we've seen thus far. If you go back to June, David Peterson and Sean Manaea have been a 1-2 punch that are comparable with any 1-2 in some of the best starting staffs in all of baseball. I'm talking Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. I'm talking Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez of the Braves. I'm talking Framber Valdez and Hunter Brown of the Houston Astros. The Mets starting staff, has been that good. And then we haven't even talked about Luis Severino, who's had some really great starts for the Mets. Of course, the complete game he threw a couple starts ago. When he goes out there, he gives the Mets a chance to win. Paul Blackburn, the ERA, a little bit unflattering, but he's been much better than that ERA says. He, of course, left the game against San Diego. That bumped the ERA up as well, and he had a tough outing against Oakland a few starts ago. But in three of his starts, he's given the Mets a quality start, and you love to see that. He'll be on the mend. And even Tyler McGill, who was thrown back into the fire on Friday night in Chicago, gave the Mets a good outing with only one run allowed in more than 5 innings of work. So this starting staff, has underratedly been, in my opinion, the best in the National League for some time now, and that coincides with why the Mets are 9 games over 500.
Yeah, John, and I really want to quickly mention Jose Quintana, another guy who got the Mets through another series. Also had a great start in his last outing before this, and has really kept opponents' exit velocities down. But let's stop talking about the starting rotation. Let's talk about this bullpen, where it looks like Edwin Diaz is starting to show himself again, and in a very positive way. And one of those reasons might be something as simple as what we heard Mendoza say about Edwin Diaz. And that's Edwin Diaz is a guy who likes to pitch a lot. He doesn't like weeks off at a time. He doesn't like 5-day breaks. Edwin himself has said that when he gets too many days off, he almost overthrows when he comes out and he loses control. Like he's almost sitting for 5 days and is just so pent up. He gets out there excited, probably hears Narcos, totally pumped up with the amazing light show and all the fans out there cheering him on, that he just wants to perform. And we saw him go out there on 4 out of 5 days this week and just look like an absolute stud for most of those.
Yeah, I mean, on Sunday, he was really unhittable through 14 pitches, 9 strikes, struck out the side. The big thing was he looked like he was comfortable with his slider again. Had 3 swings against the pitch, all swings and misses with the pitch. So it was a good sign that Edwin had the feel for the slider. And it really looks like the Mets are now starting to take the full shackles off Edwin Diaz. Earlier in the year, it kind of felt like they were maybe easing him back in, of course, after not pitching last year. Went on the injured list, came back, was dominant, had the suspension. That changed the dynamic a little bit as well. Like you mentioned, he's now pitched in 4 of the last 5 days, and Carlos Mendoza brought him into a game looking for a 4-out save against Arizona. And the other big thing here, and the bullpen at large, Jose Butto struggled a week ago in San Diego, gave up the 2-run home run to Jerickson Profar. He comes in, gets the job done on Saturday night. Edwin Diaz, tough outing in Arizona. He comes back. He has a great weekend in Chicago. The guys who struggled in the last week or so, they end the road trip by getting back to their dominant ways, and you love to see that bounce back ability, especially from relief pitchers. We know that the goldfish memory is such an important aspect for a reliever, and these guys showed just that, bouncing back, closing out this road trip on a strong note.
Some really good outings from Brazaban, really good outings from Reed Garrett. Reed Garrett, who really looked like he had control of that sweeper again, was getting lots of swings and misses on it. So I think a lot of things that are trending up, and Jose Budo just again going out there and helping the Mets get it done when Edwin Diaz was not available, and some good news from the Mets because Dedniel Nunez is not at this time getting any sort of surgery, as far as we know right now. So he's still in the mix for this what's going to be a pretty crazy September, John. I mean, last time I remember this was 2019. Mets were heading into a September where they were still in it, but I would say not even as good as a position they're in right now. Um, and I mean, I remember when it all fell apart there. It was my second date with my wife, my third date with my wife, and I took her to Mets Dodgers. And I remember that kind of felt like the final nail in the coffin Sunday night baseball. But we're in a much better position than we are right now. And it's Labor Day tomorrow, and we're watching important Mets games, dude.
Well, that 2019 season, so the Mets had that series against the Nationals. They went on the road. They went to Atlanta. They went to KC. They came home the last week before Labor Day, so the last real week of the summer. Around this time, they got swept by the Braves at home, and they got swept by the Cubs. They lost 6 straight games, and that kind of knocked them out. And then you mentioned that that home weekend series against the Dodgers as well. That was really the final blow. That was really the nail in the coffin. But
Yeah.
losing those 6 straight games that I just mentioned, that kind of it made it clear where things were probably going with the Mets and the inconsistency that plagued them that season. Not the case right now. Like I said, the Mets are 11-5 in their last 16 games. They're playing great baseball. They are putting pressure on the teams in front of them. The Cubs are white hot. The Cubs have gotten themselves back into it all of a sudden, but the Mets continue to win to keep that little distance between them and the Cubs. The Mets, who knows if they could put pressure on the Padres. The Padres have a pretty tough schedule the rest of the way, so that'll be interesting to watch. And you want to talk about the Mets math, Vito. Last time we said it was 17-11 the rest of the way for the Mets to get to 87 games. After the sweep, it's now 14-11 the rest of the way in the last 25 games. That would get the Mets to 87. I do want to say right now, you might want 88 to be safe. 87, I'm not so sure that's going to get you in right now with the Braves, with the way the Braves are playing right now. Is it still 1-0, Vito, in this game?
Yes, it is still 1-0 at this moment.
Okay, so, I don't think, and you mentioned this, what more can you ask for? It's Labor Day. The Mets are playing big games. We have a really exciting, fun September ahead of us. Football, we had our first big full week of college football. For all those who enjoy that, I know I enjoyed watching it. And up on deck is the NFL Week 1. You got a Thursday game, a Friday game. You got Sunday, a full slate. This is a great time of the year. And what makes this time of the year even better is having that stressful baseball to watch. That's why we love it, and that's what we got. I'm so happy this time of the year is here, and the Mets are going to take us on an incredible ride. It's going to be wild, but that's the way we want it, right? That's the way that Mets baseball is meant to be. It's not supposed to be easy. All the times the Mets have had success and triumph in their history, they've always overcome some adversity. So let's make this time no different. A huge September. You guys got to get out to Citi Field. I know, Vito, you were about to mention that, but you guys, we need to see you. We need to hear you at Citi Field supporting this team. I am so excited for Monday. Finally back at Citi Field. Get behind this team. Let's have a big series against the Boston Red Sox.
Let's talk about some more Mets numbers. How about the Mets in August? A month where there were a few times where some Mets fans decided to put their hands up in the air and say, that's it, the season's over. You would think that the Mets had some terrible month. No, they went 15-13. That's an above 500 month. That's great, right? Now, why don't we go even further back, John? Why don't we go all the way back to a day where a glove flew in the air? I won't get any more specific than that. The Mets since then have went 50-30. Well, no, this was as far as yesterday. They were 50-31. So now they're what? They're 51-31. So they're 20 games over 500 at that point. Only second to the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Mets have been one of the top 2 hottest teams in baseball since that day. That's regardless of the terrible month of May that happened. They went on to just get to this point. We were 11 games under at one point, and we're on our way to possibly getting to 11 games over coming up. So my point is, Mets fans, this is a magical season. There's been so many things that went right this year. There's something really special about this team. This week is going to be another one of those weeks, like John said. So get yourself out to the ballpark because you only got 2 homestands left. And me and John were talking about this the other night on a text, but I know I used to torture myself. I used to absolutely torture myself and go to games in September and August when the Mets were out of it and there was nothing to watch. But I wanted to be a baseball game so badly, and I knew I would miss it in November. I would miss it in December, that I just got every game I could. What I'm saying to you is don't regret this in 2 months. Get to those games right now, because these are the moments that you're going to look back on and you're going to remember. Holy cow, do you remember when I was at that game against the Red Sox and the Mets won to just keep this thing going? Remember when I was at the game where the Mets won their 5th game straight versus the Red Sox on Monday night and all this exciting stuff happened? Lawrence, the band, was outside of Citi Field performing. There's so much going on this week, guys. You got to get to Citi.
You do. It's like I said, it's going to be an incredibly fun September. This team has been knocked down and gotten back up over and over and over again. They've clearly proven that they will never stay down when they're knocked down. That's not in this team's DNA. That, I think, started day one of spring training when, Carlos Mendoza talked and addressed the team for the first time. This is a different kind of team. And this team has an opportunity to do something really, really special. And they've proven that they can play with anybody in the National League. And, the last couple years, with the way the postseason has gone, the Phillies sneaking into the playoffs with the last wild card spot, going to the World Series in 2022, what the Diamondbacks did last year, the last wild card spot, going to the World Series. The Mets have the starting pitching clearly, as we've outlined for you. The Mets bullpen has looked great, only 1 run allowed in the last 4 games during this winning streak, as Vito mentioned. This Mets team has a lot of things that make it very dangerous, especially in a short series. And right now, we're to this point. It's September 1st, 1 good month, and the Mets are playing postseason baseball. And hopefully we get a taste of that at Citi Field, because we know how special that is. And it's going to be even more special this time around. Opposing teams do not want to come into our house in October. I can promise you that.
100%, John. Now we're going to go to a listener voicemail before we wrap up the show. Let's hear it.
Hey, Vito and John. This is Rob from Delaware. I wish I caught up with you guys in Lehigh Valley. I also want to thank you for Future of Flushing, because without that podcast, I never would have been hip to the forum system and the minor league games, and you guys have really turned me on to the forum system with that podcast. I did want to tell you to never eat at Wawa. It is an overpriced gas station with sometimes clean bathrooms. The food there is made for people that say home and Coke. You guys come from the greatest food area in the world. Wawa should never be on your radar for food. And finally, what I called about, what John was saying about Pete's best baseball coming up. I really hope John's right. I think he is. Pete has been playing phenomenally. He's really been connecting lately. I'm really hoping for 2025 that he is back on the team, and we are looking at pennant and World Series wins next year.
That was Rob from Delaware. And if you want to get on the action too, you can call the number below, 302-615-0026. That's 302-615-0026. Rob, love everything you had to say. Appreciate that you enjoyed Future of Flushing. A lot of that content is going to live on the Meet at the Apple feed now. So if you listen to me at Future of Flushing, make sure you're subscribed right here. But I do got to disagree with you, because I really do like Wawa. I understand we're from a great sandwich city. I understand we got great sandwich shops like Sal Chris and Charlie's. We got Fiori's in the West Village. We got a lot of great places. But sometimes a nice Wawa Italian hoagie is good. And I want to put those positive Philly vibes out right now, because they're down 1-0 and I need them to win.
Yeah, I mean, kind of a hot take there by John from Delaware, who, Wawa is not only in Philadelphia. Me, as a Central Jersey guy, there was a Wawa within like 200 yards of Marlboro High School that people went to constantly. It was, after school ended, people walked over there. They got themselves their sandwich. Wawa is such a versatile spot. We're talking about Jose Iglesias and Pablo Reyes and how great versatility is. Wawa is essentially the Jose Iglesias / Pablo Reyes of convenience.
Did not expect that. Did not expect that at all. If you asked me 100 things that John was going to say in response to this call, I would have never guessed that John was going to say Wawa's the Jose Iglesias of gas stations.
I mean, they haven't written a hit single yet, but if they do, then that's a great comparison right there.
I actually could send you a really good Wawa hoagie song. I will send it to you after this. They didn't make it, but there's some good Wawa hoagie music. But dude, I mean, like I was chowing down on my Italian hoagie on the way from the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs game.
When you're on the way back from Allentown, Pennsylvania, driving to New York, Wawa is the perfect thing to get. We all went in. I filled up my tank. It wasn't cheap, I'll say that, but I could kill two birds with one stone. I fill up my tank, I park the car, we go in, we all get something to eat, to enjoy, to nourish us after a long day at Coca-Cola Park. I think it's perfect. Like, is it my recommended place? If someone asks me, hey, where do you want to go out to dinner for your birthday? Am I going to say Wawa? No, I'm not going to say Wawa. But there's a lot to be had, and there's a lot of value in going to a place at Wawa for the purpose of our trip. As for Pete Alonso, I remain steadfast in my belief that Pete Alonso is going to have a major September here. He had a big weekend in Chicago. We didn't mention that was finally the fifth time that Pete Alonso has hit 30 or more home runs in a season. His home run Saturday was his 30th home run. That is the most 30 home run seasons by any player in Mets history. Pete Alonso is basically a lock to hit you at least 30 home runs as a floor. That is rare. That is something that teams look for. Teams really try to find, and it's not easy to find what Pete Alonso brings to the table in the power category. So Pete Alonso has been a great all-time Met. I know a lot of people, questioned us posing the question, is Pete Alonso the best position player in Mets history? It's really not that crazy of a question. The guy hasn't even played 6 full seasons, and he's, atop so many lists. He's a great Met. He is a fantastic Met, and I'm really excited to see what he does in September. I know Pete is really excited to have a big, exciting finish to the season here. It's going to be great. So, John, I'm glad that you, the two Johns here, I guess, are sharing a brain when it comes to Pete Alonso.
His name was Rob, John.
I thought it was John. I thought you said John.
I said Rob from Delaware. I think I said
got
Rob
the Delaware.
from Delaware.
I thought you said John.
I even made his name bold right here.
Might have been a faux pas. I thought I heard you say John. Anyway, Rob.
Who knows?
I apologize. Still 3 letters.
Hey, and you know what? But unless it was John with a J-O-H, then if you were saying that, I don't know. But, John, one more thing about Pete Alonso. I'm not sure if you said this before. Pete Alonso, with this home run versus the White Sox, has hit a home run against every team that is not the Mets. And if you're a Mets fan, all you can hope is that it stays that way. And you don't go any further than that. You don't say anything more than that. You just hope that we can keep it that way for years to come. But there's a lot of baseball left. Let's see. And because of Rob's beautiful call, he mentioned future of Flushing. We wanted to quickly mention there were a good amount of promotions this week, and some guys that John and I are really fond of. One of those guys being Jonah Tong, who's had one of the breakout years of any pitching prospect in baseball. Jonah Tong goes from Brooklyn to Binghamton, which means he got a double promotion this year because he did start the year at PSL.
He did. It's awesome that he's going to get a taste of Double-A baseball, to go into the offseason, have an idea of what to expect. It's likely he'll start next season at the Double-A level after, like you mentioned, a breakout season in 2024, started the year in PSL, absolutely dominated the Florida State League. The Mets quickly realized he had nothing left to prove or, learn really from that league. And then he goes to High A Brooklyn, and he had a great year there as well. He's matured physically. He's got a big bottom half. He's a cerebral pitcher on the mound. We've had a couple chances to talk to him, and you ask him about pitch grips and tunneling and pitch shape, and he has such great insight. He's a student of the game. You could really tell his teammates love him, both as a person and as a baseball player, picking his brain, talking shop. So he's a guy that Mets fans should be very, very excited about. Of course, Brandon Sproat had the big breakout season on the pitching side that everyone talks about. But Jonah Tong has really had himself a nice season, and he's a guy going into 2025. Prospect adjudicators are really going to start talking about a lot more. You're going to hear this name a lot more. Great season for Jonah Tong, so congrats to him.
And just a devastating 12-6 curve, and something I feel like the Mets haven't had a curveball guy in a little bit of time. So it'll be really exciting to see him back here, see him up here at some point performing for the Mets. And like John said, really great guy. Let's talk about Joander Suarez, somebody that if you listen to Future of Flushing, you've heard us wax about him poetically. Joander Suarez goes from the Binghamton Rumble Ponies up to Syracuse. John and I thought we were going to maybe get to see him when we were in Syracuse and get to talk to him for a little. When we were at Lehigh Valley seeing the Syracuse Mets, because we found out on the way up and we were pretty excited for him. But Joander Suarez, a guy that Mets fans should all be paying attention to. Somebody John has said many times, Mets fans are not talking about Joander Suarez enough.
Yeah, I mean, Joander Suarez, like Jonah Tong, the Mets are letting him get a taste of the next level. Another guy who will probably start 2025, a level up for Suarez. That would make sense to be AAA Syracuse. And he's a guy who pitched really well for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies all season. He's a guy who tops out 94-ish, 95. He can get up to that range. He throws the kitchen sink at you. He is a pitcher's pitcher. I'm really excited to see how Joander Suarez responds to the challenge of facing AAA hitters, guys that have major league experience, guys that will not chase, go out of the strike zone, guys that really understand the mental game at the plate. We talked with Brandon Sprode about this. Guys looking for pitches and hunting pitches and trying to make pitchers come in with a different pitch than they want to. The cat and mouse game between pitcher batter is really fascinating. It's really an incredible part. It's like one of the most fascinating things in sports. It's almost like a good old game of rocks, paper, scissors. If I go scissor twice.
Did you say rocks?
Rock, paper, scissor.
Okay, you definitely said rocks plural, and I was about to berate you.
I did say that. So you can berate me if you'd like.
I thought you thought that was the name of the game. But it's what it reminds me of, a conversation that fans will get to see when we air it. Brandon Sprode told us when he got to AAA, he didn't realize that batters will play mind games with you. Batters will take pitchers and watch them just to make you think that they won't swing at them. And that's something that us as a common person, I'd never heard that before. I don't know if you had, but I feel like both of our jaws dropped in that moment.
Yeah, no, it was a great insight. And what I was saying was, in rock, paper, scissors, if I go scissors twice, you're probably thinking, well, what's the likelihood that he goes scissors a third time? But I know that you're probably thinking that, and maybe I'm going to go scissors a third time. So it's just a really, really intricate mental battle between a pitcher and a batter. Each new batter is a new battle. But Joander Suarez, very deserving of the promotion to AAA Syracuse, to get back on the conversation of Joander Suarez. I'm really excited to see, like I said, how he handles that new challenge.
Ronald Hernandez goes from low A Port St. Lucie to high A Brooklyn. Ronald Hernandez, another guy we've spoken to before, was traded to the Mets from the Marlins. He was traded at the complex league level. He came back in the David Robertson trade, but really, really, really interesting player who is also of Venezuelan descent and is friends with Francisco Alvarez and actually gets to work out with him in the offseason. And we've said this before, those guys who get to come up in the system together and who are friends and have that relationship, that does impact your team in the long run. Something we spoke to Brandon Sprode about when he talked about his relationship with Christian Scott. Something that we spoke to some other guys. I'm blanking right now, but we literally had this. We heard about Carson Bench and Nolan McLean, about how excited they are to come through the system together since they've played together over at Oklahoma. So Ronald Hernandez moves to Brooklyn. So Mets fans, there's a guy that you should be getting to, and we're going to mention another one after him, but there's some talent in Brooklyn right now.
There is. Ronald Hernandez, another really good season. In 2023, he was amongst the FCL leaders in walk rate. He's a guy who gets on base. He is a catcher who can also play down at first base. So there's a lot of versatility. There's a lot of value in a player like Ronald Hernandez, who will continue to get bigger and get stronger. They really like his catching ability. He is an interesting prospect. And Marco Vargas, who probably would have been there with him in Brooklyn had it not been for some injuries, but Vargas has been an on-base machine since he's come back. He played in the spring breakout game. A lot of people saw that smooth lefty swing of his. Another exciting prospect. So that David Robertson deal has yielded two really, really intriguing prospects in Vargas and in Ronald Hernandez. Hernandez, the first one to take the next step with the promotion, but Marco Vargas not far behind.
Boston Barrow goes also from low A to Brooklyn, and he's a guy that's just been tearing the cover off the ball since the beginning of the season, has just been really impressive in his first full year of pro ball, and he's coming from high school.
He is. He's a guy who's going to grow into his body. Came out of high school very thin. The Mets worked hard to put some weight on him, have him eating the right food, get in the gym, hit the iron, and he's done just that. He looks a lot bigger than he did when we met him just around this time last year. I believe it was September 4th when we went down there and got to talk to a lot of the 2023 draft class. AJ Ewing, another one of those guys. For Boston Barrow, we've talked about him before on this podcast on Future of Flushing. He is a contact merchant. Ernest Dove likes to compare him to Jeff McNeil with the tendency he has to put the ball in play. Barrow has had a great first full season of professional baseball, and another guy very deserving of the promotion. And I love that the Mets are sending all these guys into the offseason with the minor league season, right about to end. A couple leagues have a week or two. I know AAA Syracuse, I believe, has 3 weeks left. So, these guys are about to put a bow on their 2024 campaigns, and it's great for the guys who have excelled at the level they've been at for most of the year to get the chance to go into the offseason knowing, okay, what's the bar? Where's that going to be raised to, and where do I have to raise myself to continue to grow as a player and have success and eventually achieve my ultimate goal of becoming a major league ball player. So I love the player development tactic the Mets are taking, and I'm really excited to see how these guys perform in a short amount of time, but still a very important amount of time.
One of those guys in their debut who just looked absolutely stunning. 2024 pick, Ryan Lambert, out of the University of Oklahoma, right-handed pitcher. In his debut in Brooklyn, in high A Brooklyn, scoreless frame and on the radar gun, topped out at 100 miles per hour, John. So that's some stuff that seems mighty tasty looking here from Queens, right?
100%. You love obviously seeing, numbers like that on the radar gun. Also want to shout out Trey Snyder, who was taken by the Mets in the 5th round of this year's draft. He was promoted to St. Lucie, so he is the first Mets player to be drafted out of high school and play for the St. Lucie Mets in the same year. The Mets are very high on Trey Snyder. They gave him a massive signing bonus. They really wanted to lure him away from his college commitment. He did sign with the Mets. The Mets are extremely excited about him, and that's why they are challenging him as a young player who was just in high school to play against players. The league average age in the Florida State League, Vito, as we mentioned here on the show before, is 21 years old. So the Mets have taken a lot of high school talent in the last couple of years. I'd say some higher end high school talent that they were able to lure away from their college commitments. And they've been aggressive with these guys. And, that's a way that you can perhaps speed up the maturation process in a player's development. So congratulations to Trey Snyder, who is definitely going to have some very important learnings in his time in the Florida State League before he goes into the offseason. A big offseason for a kid just drafted out of high school.
All right, so we're going to wrap this episode up. Guys, we've said it before. You got to get to Citi Field this week. Look, this is a really big week. There might be some playoff energy at the ballpark this week when the Mets and the Red Sox play each other because the Red Sox are fighting for a wild card spot just like the Mets are fighting for a wild card spot. So I'm going to tell you, call up your Yankee fan friends. You know why? I want to hear people booing the Red Sox. I want this ballpark packed with people wanting to see the Mets win games. Right, John?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to hide it. I've said it here on the show. I like the Red Sox. The Red Sox and the Mets are friends. We know this. A lot of us Met fans.
Not the next 3 days.
Not the next 3 days. I mean, look, I also thought the Mets and the Orioles had a common thing that we can bond over, and then they just totally, ripped that right up.
Yeah, but you got them back.
Yeah, I didn't want to have to. That was the thing, we talked about this, but hopefully it doesn't get like that with Boston. There's a lot of memes we could use for that. You got Wahlberg, you got all sorts of stuff.
Their social media team fights dirty too, especially I've heard they've made some acquisitions, and those kids fight with the claws.
You're right. So I mean, hopefully with that acquisition being made, the Red Sox social media team doesn't go haywire here. Or, rogue, I guess, is a better way of putting it, the way the Orioles did. But, yeah, it's always fun when Boston and New York get together. Rivalries throughout all the sports, Jets, Patriots, Rangers, Bruins, Yankees, Red Sox.
We're sitting here rooting for the Phillies. Things are crazy right now, okay? Tonight we're rooting for the Phillies. The next few days, I'm saying Yankee fans, there's one team you should be looking at and saying, I hope they win some games. And your boys are right here, just like you should have been rooting for us when we played the Orioles a few weeks back and helped you out even more.
Oh, the Yankee fans were absolutely rooting for the Mets when the Orioles were in town. I was in the gym the morning of the first game of that series, and some guys who I see all the time, but I've never really spoken to, they came up to me and they're like, we're rooting for you this week. And I didn't know they were Yankee fans. And I quickly was like, oh, you're Yankee fans rooting for the Mets against the Orioles. And they were like, oh, yeah, that series was way more impactful from the Yankee perspective.
100%. But if you're the Yankees, you don't want to see the Red Sox in the playoffs.
No, you probably don't want to see them in the playoffs. I mean, the Yankees, we don't want to make this too much of a Yankee podcast. I know we said we'd sign off, or you said we'd sign off, but, for them, they want to win the division. It's all about the Baltimore Orioles right now. The Yankees lose 2 out of 3 to the Cardinals this weekend. The Orioles take 2 out of 3 from Colorado. Colorado still trips them up, and the Braves will face the Rockies this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So talk about scoreboard watching. Now we will be paying attention after the Braves leave Philadelphia.
We'll be throwing back some Coors Lights and watching some baseball games.
We will be. And then the Blue Jays visit Atlanta over the weekend before the Mets then go to Toronto. So the Blue Jays are going to have a big role in this wild card race in the National League over the next 10 days or so. But hey, September baseball, it makes for weird bedmates and it makes for weird situations where all of a sudden you find yourself rooting for a team that you generally are not that friendly with. Like the Mets fans just, putting on the Philadelphia accent, Wooder Ice and things like that this weekend. But come Monday, yeah, screw them, right? The Mets have 7 games left with the Phillies, by the way. So
yeah,
we don't want
my
to say
Philly
like
fandom ends tonight.
much.
My Philly fandom is done after this night. I'm no longer going to be rooting for the Phillies and listen to Dreams and Nightmares. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. You can follow this podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Vito F. Khaleesi. John's on Twitter at JMB9191. We will see you here back in beautiful person with each other, not in a parking lot, not on StreamYard, in our podcast room on a really long Wednesday night because it had to be a night game to end the series. We'll see you next time. Thank you for meeting us at the Apple.